Okay. Are we live? Are we recording yet?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this month's Webex Developer webinar. So I'm Phil Bellanti. I'm from the Webex Developer Evangelism team. Today's session should be very interesting. It's going to be all about Webex Service Apps. It's going to be presented by the illustrious developer evangelist, Joe Zanini. So we'll be using Slido for the webinar Q&A. So as you can probably see, we made the Slido app available right inside the Webex client. But if you prefer to use your mobile device, just use that QR code. Well, actually, I don't even see the QR code here. Never mind. But we encourage everyone to ask questions. So if there's anything that we talk about today that you want to ask questions about, just use the Slido. Before I hand it over to Joe for the main presentation, I just want to do some quick highlights on some of the Webex developer news and updates for the month of June. So first, we're very pleased to announce the new Converge Webex for Developers portal. That's at developer.webex.com. So it's in the same location, but now it includes both, the Webex Suite and Webex Contact Center platforms all in one place. So we have a couple new blog posts about it on the Converge portal at that URL right there. One is from our leader of the documentation team, that's John Francis, who walks us through all the new features of the portal and provides a good lay of the land. And then the other one, our UI UX design leader, Athena Perez, highlights the strategy around how the portal was restructured, particularly around the new navigation interface. So information is now more grouped logically to make it more discoverable for both platforms. But we also we plan to do a webinar about the Converge portal soon. So you can get a preview of all the content in Athena and John's blog posts. Also over here on the right side, just want to call attention to some other important updates that were recently listed on the Webex API changelog, and these were around the meetings APIs. First, and this one's a good one, there's a new end a meeting API. So a meeting host or a co-host or a compliance officer just use that API to end an active meeting with a specified meeting ID. So previously you needed to use the SDK to programmatically end meetings. So now it can be done with just a single API call, much, much nicer. Next, there's two new APIs exclusively for administrators. One is to get a meeting using a meeting ID, or the other is to list a meeting by meeting number or a web link. And with these, there's no host email parameter or password required. So that kind of streamlines everything there. And then finally, there's a new attribute in the get and list meetings API. These were just recently added, and it reveals that there's a Slido associated with the meeting. Just a simple true or false value. So be sure, if you want to see any of the other ones, to check out the changelog that's over on our developer portal. But with that was quick and easy. That concludes all the news and updates for this month. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Joe for the main presentation on Webex Service Apps. So Joe, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Phil. Hey, everybody. My name is Joe Zanini, developer evangelist here with Webex. I also work as an App Hub reviewer. So a lot of times I'm working with developers on building their applications and fitting it to where it will technically be sound enough to be published to the Webex App Hub. So a lot of this material comes from those conversations. On our agenda today, we're going to be talking about what is a service app, what exactly. I'm going to try to do my best to define a service app for you. We'll be going over what an administrator experience with service apps might be. From there, we'll be working backwards and talking about the developer experience, going over how to produce that administrator experience that we'll now know about. We'll be going over an optional companion integration for automating the process of gathering tokens when an administrator authorizes our service app. We'll be talking about the OAuth 2 refresh cycle that is baked into the service app implementation. And then once we know everything that there is to know from my head about service apps, we'll be talking about some known service apps use cases. Why would I build a service app? And what does that mean for the Webex developer? Moving along here, what is a service app? How do I define a service app? Well, when I'm asked that question, a lot of times I define it as if a Webex integration and a Webex bot got together, they got married, they had a child. That child would be a service app. The service app carries DNA of both of these app types. So to understand a service app, we would need to know what these app types are specifically from a technical perspective. And integration is based in bearer tokens. The first victory that a developer needs to win is they need to become a bearer of an access token on behalf of a Webex user. That victory is obtained through the OAuth 2 process. A developer would develop this OAuth 2 flow, and they can pick one of the various flows within OAuth 2 that Webex supports. The user would visit your web-based service. They would kick off that flow. They would navigate to the Webex ID broker application, authenticate, authorize your app, redirect back to your application, and you would get a code that you would then exchange for, or if you use the code flow, you would get a code and you would exchange that for an access token. And then with an access token, you would be able to make API calls on behalf of that user. So Webex servers would think that your client application is actually that user. So if I hit the people API for get my own details, it would return the details of the actual Webex user that is represented by that token. Functionality is limited to API scopes. A developer would select what this app does and what APIs the app needs access to when registering an integration. And so it's not like that token gives a developer full access to all Webex data on behalf of that user. But it is based in bearer tokens, which is the main meat of the conversation here. And so is service apps. A Webex bot is also kind of based in bearer tokens, except for that token isn't linked to a specific Webex user. It's actually linked to a machine account. A Webex bot is a user. It's limited in functionality to messaging and people APIs for the most part, but that bot has its own user ID. So if we used a bot token to hit the people API for get my own details, that API would return data about that bot as a user, a messaging user, if you will. It's managed in the Webex platform, the messaging platform. So a user, in order to use a Webex bot, they would need to know that Webex bot's user ID, and then they can reach out to the bot in the messaging platform as long as it's hosted on the web and listening for messaging events. So what does that mean for service apps? Service apps are also token-based. So the first victory that a developer needs to win is to become a bearer of a token. These tokens are not representative of an individual user, though. They actually represent an entire organization. And actually, those tokens are linked to a machine account. A service app, when a developer becomes a bearer of a token with their service app, their service app now becomes an actual user. It's actually an administrator. It's represented in Webex servers as an administrator. Now, I haven't tried to hit the get my own details API with the service apps token. Maybe that's an experiment I'll do after this. But for all intents and purposes, just like a bot, your service app is a user. It does leverage part of the OAuth 2 flow, not that first part of having a web-based platform where a user visits and then kicks off the flow from your website. But when you do get a set of tokens on behalf of an organization that represents your virtual administrator or your service app, you still get a refresh token. So that back half of the OAuth 2 flow to keep your token alive without having to have users continuously authorize your app, you can keep your tokens valid with the OAuth 2 refresh cycle. These are managed at the organization level, and what that means is a Webex administrator would be able to authorize an application from the control hub, which we're going to be looking at here in a moment. There is this concept of private and public service apps. Now, imagine I'm a new Webex customer. I am an IT admin, so I get a seat account probably. I'm in charge of dishing out user licenses for this new WebEx instance. And maybe if I'm in the know and I don't want to, and maybe I'm a little lazy and I don't want to do a bunch of work, maybe one of the first users that I create is for a developer in-house to build an application that would automate the process of migrating from my previous collaboration tool. So maybe we're moving for some other collaboration tool and I want to set up WebEx calling, WebEx meetings, WebEx messaging for my new organization and the hundreds of users that I have instead of manually going in and doing that. So I tasked this dev with building that application. I create for them a user account. They now have access to the developer portal and developer tools. That developer goes and they register a developer sandbox and they go through the process of developing their migration tool. When they're done testing it and it's ready to run and accomplish the migration, you can see in the top right picture here, there's this option for requesting admin approval. And this is in the developer portal. I'll show you what this looks like later. But that developer can click that button and request that that administrator authorize their service app. And when that happens, that developer would be able to get access to tokens and let the app do its thing. The limit here, though, is that in that case that I just described, that service app is only going to be available to the organization in which the developer belongs to. If no other developer or no other organization is going to be able to use this service app specifically, these client credentials are going to be limited in-house, and that would be a private service app. On the flip side, maybe this migration tool is so awesome that this organization decides that they want to productize it and they want to start selling its use. In that case, what they can do is they can click this top button that you see on the right-hand side and submit it to the Webex App Hub. That would open up a ticket in my team's queue. My colleague Kathy Hahn would probably be the one to identify it and begin the business review. Myself or my colleague Mark Sewell would probably do a technical review of it. Once we review the application and find it worthy to be published to the App Hub, we would set it to an approved state on our back end, and that would trigger an action in the Control Hub. This app would now be available to all WebEx administrators in the Control Hub, and we'll get a look at what that looks like. But in that case, that application that was once private is now a public service app and available to all WebEx users that have access to the Control Hub. Moving on, what is this admin experience that I've been talking about? Admins authorizing service apps. I'm going to walk you through some screenshots here. This is the Control Hub. This is where all that IT admin that I described earlier, when he gets his seed account, this is where he would probably go to begin creating that developer account. This is the dashboard for all things WebEx related as far as configurations go, even contact center. You can see on the left-hand side here, under the management section, there's a selection for apps. And if a developer or an admin wants to see the app section, they would click that option there, and they would be led to this screen. And in the top right, in the top section, we have some tabs for different app types. You can see integrations and bots there that I talked about earlier. On the far right is the service apps. For the most part, you're going to see a bunch of publicly available apps here. So anything that was published on the App Hub, you'll see listed here out of the box. You can see though that I have a private app that I have authorized for my organization, this skim app I was playing with. This is what it would look like. So as an admin, I can see what apps have been authorized. I can see, they'll be tagged in the app here. So it's really a good visual as far as understanding the landscape here. Now, let's say, my skim app, it works pretty well, but maybe I want to try it against a pro. You can see a few options above that is the ISI Analytics directory import. And let's say I want to see how well mine performs against ISI Analytics directory import. I can click on that option, and this would be the authorization screen. Now, if you're familiar with OAuth 2, you have a third-party web-based platform where we go to your website and kick off the OAuth flow, and then we're presented with an authorization screen. This is very similar to that, except for admins have to authenticate into the Control Hub, and they're presented with the authorization process right here. We can just toggle this on. We have some information from the App Hub here, the description, and also the description of the application, and also some information about the developer here. What is the third-party organization? Who do I reach out for support if I need that? And then what scopes or what functionality is this service app limited to? Now, as an admin, I would just turn this on, and if I have a relationship with a third party that is listed here, I would be able to just let them know that I did it, or they should already know that I did it, and I can start using the tool. Now, this actually solves some potential issues and makes authorization really simple, and I'll go over what I mean in comparison to an OAuth 2 flow. Now, what you're looking at here is a admin level integration from one of our publicly available third-party tools that does reporting and analytics on Webex calling. So if I wanted to connect my Webex account to this third-party service, you can see I'm not on any Webex service here. I'm at this third-party's application. I would click this card, and then at some point I'd be redirected in the OAuth 2 flow over to the ID broker application where I would authenticate with Webex. At this point in the process, that third party's not involved. The browser has done its thing and sent me to a different website. I'm not sharing my credentials with this third party, so it's pretty safe. I give my user credentials, I authenticate, and after I authenticate, I'm presented with an authorization screen. Now you can see this information is very similar to what we saw in the Control Hub when we were authorizing a service app. We have some information about the third party here, which is an awesome tool called Mayobi. And in this case, and we have a set of API scopes that this application is limited to. We're getting some information about what this application does. And if we click this button, we would be redirected back to the Mayobi site. Mayobi would be able to do its thing to get a set of tokens. And then we would be able to just use the tool, right? But there's a potential issue that this solves, and I don't want to pick on Mayobi or any other reporting and analytics tool because there are some limitations with service apps where you would need to build an integration. This is an admin level integration, but some of the analytics tools, the analytics APIs don't accept machine accounts. So for now, this kind of tool would need to be an integration. So this doesn't really fall into the bucket of what I'm talking about, but to illustrate the issue here, let's say the administrator that accepts this authorization leaves the organization that they work for, and then they're replaced by a different IT administrator that may or may not know that their company is paying for it and using a third-party solution like this. Maybe they, how would they even know to even look for this, right? So maybe they are a little intuitive and they start searching the documentation and they're able to find where they can see tokens and what has been authorized in the organization in the Control Hub, if they even think to do this. Maybe they're a little bit more technical and they know about the APIs and they know that they can go and list all authorizations that have been done by any user. And then if they don't like one, they can delete it and then bring in their own tools if they want. But the good thing about a service app is everything's consolidated into this section in the Control Hub. And if I don't want to use a tool, I can turn it off. If I want to keep using a tool, or if I want to find out that our company is paying to use a third-party tool, I can start establishing support routes and customer success routes with that third party by visually seeing here that my company has turned this on, right? So this is a really good problem that gets solved with service apps. And then also there's a developer problem that gets solved with if I don't have the structure or the architecture to include a OAuth 2 flow, but I need to get tokens. I need to become the bearer of a token to do administrator level things. I don't have to depend on any website that may or may not exist to kick that off. I can actually just defer to Control Hub for kicking off an authorization for my app to become a bearer of a token. So some problems are getting solved here, and also the power of a machine account is a little bit more powerful than the limits on user-based integrations. Moving on, what is the developer experience? Now we know what the end game looks like, right? I want to develop an app that is populated on the Control Hub somehow, whether that's private or publicly. I want to be able to win the first victory of becoming a bearer of a token. But let's start from that. Let's step back and start from the beginning of the developer experience. I kind of defined it earlier, but we'll go through it. So for every developer journey, I always encourage all developers to start with a developer sandbox. These are free, so you don't have to pay for a developer sandbox. You can create a free Webex account. If you don't already have a Webex account, log into the developer portal and request a developer sandbox. These come with 10 user licenses. So you're going to get a seed account, an admin account when you do request this and it gets approved. You're going to be able to log into the control hub and create up to 9 sub users. These users are going to be able to do things like have meetings, send messages, conduct telephone calls for internal dialing, and extension dialing is the word I'm looking for. And the good thing about these is you'll be able to test all kinds of apps. So embedded apps, integrations, bots, service apps. You can test all these and you don't have to worry about messing up the configurations on your production organization that your company may be using right now. So these are very powerful. They exist for Suite and for Contact Center. If you're already a Contact Center customer, you can request one. They're not so freely given out on the Contact Center side because they do come with PSTN enabled, and so those need to get approved. They go through an additional screening process. For the Suite, though, you can just request them. And then there's different kinds of sandboxes. You can see here on the initial developer sandbox request page that there's the option to request a guest-to-guest sandbox. So if you're interested in testing guest-to-guest licenses and building with that solution, you can get a sandbox for that before you start dealing with production instances. And also for the new guest issuer flow with service apps, you can get a guest issuer application as well, or sandbox, I should say. So this is always the beginning of every developer journey. Get a developer sandbox. Once you have a developer sandbox, I got the step-by-step guide here. If you guys want to look at this deck later, you can ask me for it. I'm going to be walking through each one of these steps here, so I'm not going to read these out right now. This is the small short list of things that a developer has to do. It's a little bit more complicated than a short list, but you'll see what I mean here in a moment. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in to the developer portal with a user from that sandbox account. I'm going to click on my avatar in the top right-hand corner. It looks a little bit different now. When I made this deck, it was before the Converge portal, so you may see some different things here, which you are going to see some different things here, but bear with me. These options are still the same. You would be able to select that My Webex Apps option there. And when you do that, if it's a brand new account, if it's a brand new sandbox, you're going to see this screen. If you've already been building apps, you'll see a list of apps and you'll have an option to create a new app. And then you'll go to this screen. But for developing service apps, we're going to select that button there, the Create a Service App button. That leads to a web form. It's a pretty basic web form. We're going to ask you some information about your service app. You can see that this is an app that and this whole presentation actually is a presentation that I did at Cisco Live. We're repurposing it here in the webinar. So you can see some Cisco Live information here from a few weeks ago. But you would name your service app. You would give us some information about that service app, either provide or select a custom icon. After you're done filling out that basic information, we're going to ask you about scopes. And because this is a service app, you're probably going to want to select some admin level scopes. An administrator with compliance permissions can also enable a service app that selected compliance rules. So I've made sure, and there's a whole long list of scopes. Like, it's a really long list, and I didn't want to have several screenshots just to go over the scopes when the admin ones are near the top as well. But you'll note that service apps aren't just limited to admin things. You can do a lot of other things that you can do with integrations. All of the scopes are available here. But yeah, so you would select your scopes, letting your users know what does your app do, what APIs are going to be hit once I get a token. And then you'll be met with the congratulatory screen. Now, one thing to note here is you'll see that we have some client credentials, some information about our app, the option now in the developer portal to submit a request to an admin to get our service app put into that private app state, or if we want to submit to the App Hub and make it publicly available. One thing I would like to note and highlight is the client credentials. Why as this person that develops with these, I always make it a point to grab those client credentials and copy them somewhere, because the client secret does go away. It's hidden after if you navigate away from that page and come back. So make a note of these, put them in a database, put them in your notepad or something like that, somewhere safe ideally, because these are client credentials for your client or service application. For me, it just makes sense to grab it. You can always regenerate this, but it does, when you do regenerate this client secret, it does invalidate the previous secret. So you need to change it in your code base if you've built the companion integration. Alternatively, you need to change it any other where you have it, just because that one would be invalid. So I always like to make a note of it right out of the gate, so I don't have to keep regenerating it, and I can just use the original one. Alternatively, you can regenerate it. Just a thing I like to mention when I'm talking to developers about this. Now, you can see that button that we would select to privatize this application, right? To make it a private app. I can click this button. I can go into the Webex messaging platform and let my admin know that I submitted a request. We know that it's in that request is in process when I can see that the submission status has been submitted. From there, it would be available in the control hub. So if I'm using my sandbox, I can just navigate right over to the control hub with my administrator user from that sandbox, and then I can enable it. When I'm done developing, again, I can go to submit to the Webex App Hub and make that publicly available. Now, so that button is here. Let's say I am working with my private app and I toggle this on. What happens, right? From the developer perspective, what happens? We know that this is an option, but I don't know what happens behind the veil here. Well, two things happen. Two things can happen, I should say. First thing is, once I know that this is authorized and my admin has told me, or I'm the admin in my sandbox and I did it, I can go back to the developer portal and a new section will appear in the developer portal within the page of the application. There's going to be this org authorizations. Now, if my app is in private mode and I'm a developer and I belong to one organization, there's only going to be one app listed here. But if it's a publicly available app, this list can get infinitely long. So that's something to think about. So I would select my org that authorized. Ideally, I don't need to regenerate my client secret because we do need to plug it into the box here to generate tokens. So once I plug in my client secret into the UI here and I click the button for generate tokens, I'm going to get a set of access and refresh tokens. And I've accomplished that first victory as a developer. I've become a bearer of a token. So this token right here represents a virtual administrator, the access token, I should say. And I can plug that into my code base and start using it to make API calls on behalf of my organization as a virtual administrator. And I also get a refresh token for that refresh cycle, which we'll be going over here in a moment. Now, one thing I did want to point out here for developers, because it's kind of important, if you do have a publicly available app and you start getting a long list of org authorizations, we can search by org ID. But one thing I did want to note is that the basic or standard org ID that you see in the control hub will never match on a search in this search option here. Developers would need to produce a base64 encoded version of that org ID in order for it to hit when you have a long list of applications here. That process is documented here at the Identity Organization API. So this is what you would need to use. So you would base64, the standard org ID, prepended to that standard org ID is this URL, the Cisco Spark : / et cetera. And then that base64 encoded version of the org ID will work in that search bar. So just something to note. Now, moving back here, let's say that I have a whole bunch of apps on, where's the view at? Right here. Let's say that I have an infinite list of apps here, hundreds of, my app's publicly available, and I have hundreds of orgs that have authorized my application. In that case, we can build this optional companion integration. Now, this integration isn't something that we'd put on the App Hub. It's a separate client that we would need to register on the developer portal. We would implement OAuth 2. During the next slides here, you'll see that I talk about a UI. I'm going to give you a little hack here to kind of get around that if you don't want to do that. But at the end of the day, we're going to use this integration with the developer, where the developer is going to implement the OAuth 2 flow on their own behalf. I want my client to have an access token and refresh tokens that represents me as the developer and has my permission sets and knows about service apps that I have registered. Once it gets my token, I want it to register webhooks on my behalf. I want to tell Webex to let me know whenever a organization authorizes my application. And when that happens, emit an event to me, right? And let me, I have a server listening for this event or this webhook. And in response to that event, I'm going to reach out and use the API to get tokens instead of manually going into the developer portal here. So it really helps with making our publicly available service application scalable. I'm going to go over kind of what this looks like here in non-list format. Now, again, the first step here is going to be registering in another client or another application, a Webex integration on the developer portal under the same account that I registered the service app with. I'm going to fill out the web form. The process is going to be very similar to what we just saw. I'm going to select some scopes specific to this task. The first one is going to be the application token scope. And side note here, for right now, in my experience, and this could have changed within the last few weeks, but for me, I found that my token getter wouldn't work unless I selected Spark All. So if you find that your app isn't working and you don't know why, maybe select Spark All and it'll start working. That just was my experience. Some other scopes that we're going to need to think about are going to be the application webhook write and the application webhooks read. This is going to be so that we can read and write webhooks on behalf for applications that we've developed, in particular the service app. We'll have the permissions from our developer account to write those, to listen for those events with these scopes. Then I'll get met with a congratulatory screen again. I'll get presented with a new set of client credentials. This is going to be my application's username and password. And then I'll be able to start doing, I have everything I need here to build out my OAuth 2 flow, right? And in the next screen, I'll show a UI, but a little hack that I like to use is this black box here that has a URL. You can just copy this URL and paste it in the browser if you've already developed a server that's listening for the redirect from the ID broker application. So the first part of the OAuth flow, if you will. And we can kick off the OAuth flow in the browser with this, right? This is never going in the app hub. We're not really worried about a fancy UI if we don't want to do that. So if you want to just quick and dirty way of giving your client tokens and authorizing your own application, you can just grab this URL, paste it in the browser, and be on your way. Alternatively, you can build out a full-fledged OAuth 2 flow on a web page for yourself. You'll note here in this diagram that I've built out, and this little animation that I use sometimes, that I talk about the UI here. So a developer, again, the whole concept here is I'm kicking off this OAuth flow on for myself. I'm going to then be redirected to the ID broker application. The third party and all other applications are out of the picture here. Me, the developer, and Webex are having an exchange. I'm going to authenticate. I'm going to authorize my own integration. And then from that point, I'm going to be able to get some access tokens. Now, I'm not going to go over the full OAuth flow here, but the Webex cloud will provide my client with access tokens that represent me as a developer, user/user. And so my client can make API calls on my behalf at this point. And then what my client does, you can see the service app is in the picture, but it really isn't at this point, is my client is going to use that authorization, use that token because the client has selected those scopes for writing and reading webhooks, and it's going to write 2 webhooks in this case. And the second webhook isn't absolutely necessary, but I like to do it just to be complete. We have the authorized events that we're going to listen for. So whenever an admin goes in and authorizes my app, I want to know about it. And whenever an admin goes in and turns my app off or detoggles my app or deauthorizes my app, I want to know about that as well, so I can destroy the tokens and maybe send, one of my sales folks over to that customer to see why they left or why they turned it off or if they needed any assistance, right? So pretty cool to have the deauthorized event available as well. Now, once I've registered those events, the administrator, knows about my publicly available service app. They go into the control hub, they authorize my service app, and once they do this, the Webex Cloud is going to let my integration, my companion integration, know that someone has authorized your application. And in response to that integration or service app authorization event, my integration will see a JSON object like this. And the reason why I highlight this is because there's some things that we need from the documentation. And I didn't bring up the documentation here, but I wanted to show you what this event looks like in JSON format. And the main reason is because the org ID value is already base64 encoded the way you need it. So if you just want to use this to go back and search, you can do that too. Alternatively, you can scale out and automate the entire process. Now, one thing in my experience that I've known is that in order to get the API to work to get tokens, I need to decode this. So you may want to play with that. I was looking at the documentation yesterday and it said you didn't have to anymore, but I haven't tested that yet. But just note this value is already base64 encoded. So if you do need a standard org ID from this value, you got to decode this and abstract the standard ID from the end of that string. Moving on, now that I have everything that I need to make the API call to the application token endpoint for my service app to be able to be functional and become a bearer token on behalf of an organization, so I want to become a bearer of a token, I have everything I need now. The application token endpoint is going to give me that access and refresh token on the end to represent that organization and turn my service app into a virtual administrator. I'm going to then hand that, and this is what that looks like here. And you can see when it's a little bit different than the UI in the sense that it's the same tokens, but this time we get a little bit more information. We know how long those tokens live for. I have an access token that's going to live for about 2 weeks. That's in seconds. It's 1,209,599 seconds. And then I have a refresh token by default that lives for 7,775,999 seconds, and that's about 90 days. So I have 2 weeks on the access token, 90 days on the refresh token. I take those, I store them in a database that my service app also has access to. And so now my code base or my servers for my service app can easily access tokens on behalf of that org and start doing their thing. Now my service app can reach out to the Webex APIs as a virtual administrator, and as a developer, I never had to go into the developer portal to get tokens if I didn't want to. So this is a really cool companion integration. It's optional. You can go in and manually get your tokens if you want. But if you want to scale out and really have a whole bunch of users, you can have a companion integration to do that for you. Now, I built a sample of this. It might be a little outdated because this technology was brand new. It's in Webex samples. I have a QR code that I'm going to leave here for you. Again, there's some techniques that I think might be outdated here based on the documentation that I read yesterday, but I know this worked because I just tested it a few weeks ago, so it still does work. But definitely, I have a diagram on this page and everything like that. So if you want to grab this and start using my sample code as your base, or to help further understand the companion integration that I'm talking about, please feel free to do that. Now we're going to talk about what do we do with that refresh token now that we have it. How am I doing on time, Phil? We got plenty of time. That refresh cycle. You saw that I got both a access token and a refresh token, and after 2 weeks, my service app is just going to be doing its thing on its own. It's going to be running. And at some point, I'm going to see a 401 error. That's going to let my client know that I have an invalid access token. What do I do now? Well, there's that back half of the OAuth 2 flow. I still have a valid refresh token that is alive for 90 days. So, about 2.5 more months than my access token. So what I can do in response to that 401 error is I can leverage that refresh token and hit the access token endpoint again with my valid refresh token and my client credentials. And I can get a fresh set of access token refresh token and again start making API calls. Now I drew this out pretty simply, but there's some functions you got to write there for the refresh cycle. We have OAuth 2 samples on that same Webex samples repo that I linked to earlier, where we have the in-depth examples on how to do the refresh cycle. But basically, you get everything once you initially get your app authorized. Now, unless a developer or an admin goes in and toggles off that authorization that they initially did in the control hub, that would kill both tokens. So none of this is going to work when that happens. So that's why we have that event registered in the companion integration for deauthorization to let us know when that happens, so we can tell our service to not reach out anymore to the Webex REST API, and we can destroy our tokens in that case as well, so that we don't have any sensitive data laying around on behalf of an organization. No more virtual admin. We'll put it to rest. So now that we know everything about building service apps, why would we build a service app? What are some of the use cases? These are some of the things that I have seen. There's probably a whole longer exhaustive list, but getting started, everything administrator, right? My service app is an administrator. It's a virtual administrator. So I can do things like user management, migration, configuration updating, adding devices, things like that. Also reporting to some sense. There are some analytics APIs that don't work with machine accounts, but the basic WebEx reporting APIs will work with service apps. Now, some compliance role things. I said that earlier, that if an administrator also has compliance permissions and a service app is scoped out for compliance things, then you can enable a service app to handle your compliance use cases like messaging monitoring or recording and data management and access and permission controls and things like that. Also, guest management. There used to be, or it still kind of is, you can still probably go create the old guest issuer application. It's not supported like it used to be, but the guest issuer application has been wrapped by service apps now. So once I know how to build service apps, I can get back to building guest issuer applications. And the way this works is I am a WebEx user. Maybe I'm a fitness coach or a life coach or a doctor, and I have a web page that I want to be able to conduct WebEx meetings on with my paid WebEx account, and I want to be able to talk to my clients that may or may not be WebEx users. I can build a service app that handles building that web application experience and allowing non-WebEx licensed users to join me on my meeting with my WebEx instance that I pay for. So really cool tool. Again, guest issuer has been wrapped by service apps. So if you want to build guest issuer apps, you got to build service apps. There's also the guest to guest license type. Now this is where I want to buy WebEx, but I don't want to assign licenses to individual users. I want to just be able to host meetings. Well, that requires a little bit of development, and that experience is probably going to be bound to the browser. And in order to get started with that kind of WebEx license, then we're going to need to know how to develop WebEx service apps. And so this is another use case there. And then finally, and we're about at the end here of my presentation, the bring your own virtual agent and soon bring your own AI is powered by a service app with the bring your own data source mechanism. So Monday, I've heard Monday is the day that the bring your own virtual agent for developers is going to be GA'd. This is going to be behind a paywall, but in order to get started developing this tool, we need to know service apps, because it is the beginning mechanism. The service app is how I tell WebEx services where to send data that I need to power my AI experience. There are some scopes here for this. It's the data source read and the data source write scopes that are limited to this use case. but definitely a really cool tool. I'm not going to break out too much into this because it's brand new and I'm not exactly an expert on it yet. But I do know enough to know that you need to know service apps in order to get started developing this. And that is my presentation, Phil. If do we have any questions or anything like that?
Yeah, it looks like there's a bunch of questions. So we'll some of these were answered. I'm going to go first for the ones that haven't been answered in the Slido or the chat yet. This one here from Roy Reisman said that, how can we develop a service app as multi-tenant, meaning need to test two different organizations in parallel? Should I publish during development in order for the app to be available for two organizations, or is there a mode of preview where we can whitelist the organization for my app? After I publish my first app version, and then I want to upgrade and add more consents, how the upgrade process is going.
So if I understand the question correctly, I built a service app in-house and I want to test it with another organization, but I don't want to put it on the app hub and make it available for everybody.
Yep, that's the way I understand it too.
What I would do in that case is, remember that the front loading of your service app is pretty lightweight, right? So there's two things I can do. If it depends on my relationship with the organization. Now, how do I say this and be secure? Because I got to think through this. So again, I belong to an organization. I'm a developer. I log in with my credentials. I register a service app. That service app has client credentials that I need, right? So that Webex knows who they gave tokens to. What I can also do is the code base that I use to develop that service app is I can have this other org go in on their own behalf and register a service app. And I wouldn't recommend this if you're going to do this with a whole bunch of orgs, but they can share with you the client credentials for that service app, and then you can start using that to build with it and let them know that you did that, and work with them closely. Again, that client ID and client secret for your service app is sensitive information, so you're going to want to be really careful with that. Alternatively, if you can productize or make your application public, put it on the App Hub if it's something that you want multiple organizations to use and be available for. And I could be a contact for you for that as well.
Yeah, gotcha. And then here, is it possible to use a private service app to enable users to update the forward all settings for a hunt group in Webex calling? And
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident the answer is yes. That's actually a pretty good use case, I think, for service apps. Hunt group forwarding as an administrator task. Obviously a very important one in Webex calling. So I think that's actually a perfect use case for service apps. And let's see here, for this one here, when you're referencing public app versus private app, maybe we can just clarify this one more time. The person asking is the public app would be accessible within the organization and not to external users. But here it's the public app is available to external users as long as the administrator allows it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, no. So let's back up here. So a private service app is one in which a developer within an organization registers that app, and if that happens at that state, it's only available in the org that developer belongs to. Meaning, I'm a Webex user. I have meetings on Webex. I send messages on Webex. I belong to an organization, right? There's an administrator at some point that set me up as a user. If I create a service app, that administrator can turn on an app that I build. And at that point, that's a private service app limited to that organization. It's important with service apps to get our head away from individual users, because a service app doesn't operate on behalf of any users. A service app is a user. A service app is an administrator and represents a whole organization. A publicly available service app is one that gets published on the App Hub. And when any administrator goes into any organization's control hub, they can see it listed in the service app section of the control hub. And they can turn it on and turn it off. And that service app, that developer that you turn that publicly available service app on that's available in the control hub out of the box, that developer is going to get a set of tokens, and that application, that service app, is going to be a virtual administrator for that organization.
Yeah, and in Control Hub, I think, when you look at the approving a service app, there's a whole bunch of other apps that are already listed in there, right?
Yeah,
And
those are all public.
Those are all the public ones, right? That are listed on the App Hub. Okay, let me see here. I have some questions that are not necessarily to the topic, but we can see if we can get some of these in here. Somebody was asking about the recommended way to calculate the call rate, and I'm assuming that means the rate of API calls.
No. Wait a second. Maybe, or is that tells calls like coming into a call center?
Not certain on that one. Didn't have much context beyond the
so
call rate.
If it is the rate limit, there's a let's see here. Let me get the page on the rate limit. 1 second here.
Yeah, and I think Taylor's blog would probably be a good one to do, because he has a little example of how you can handle the rate limiting.
1 second. There's a page, and the page is REST API basics. This is one that I share all the time. Let me see if I can get this in the chat here. Of course, I closed Webex, so I wouldn't be bothered during the presentation. Let's see here. 1 moment. If it's not the rate limit, or we're talking about calls, there's a whole bunch of like formulas that are built to populate this. If you're talking about call center stuff, it could be that you're interested in. Oh, there you go. You have it there. That's the blog. Yeah, use that one. It could be that you're talking about what's being reported in the analyzer tool for Webex Contact Center. And in that case, I would leverage the search API and not really do my own calculations. If you must do your own calculations, if you're talking about inbound calls or outbound calls for that matter, you can open a developer support ticket and ask for a formula, and maybe somebody on that team will give you a formula. But I don't know off the top of my head if we're talking about telephony calls there.
Okay, and one came in. He said that he was advised that when creating a hunt group, you cannot have it forward off network to external cell phones, and wanted to know if there was any way around that using an API.
I know, and in that case too, I would also talk to your TAC representative in that case, is to work on those. I don't like if that's what it was said. I'm not a big fan of pushing workarounds for security reasons.
Yeah, and usually that's not the case, with anything like that. If you could do it manually, then you could do it in the API. But it's very rarely is you can do it in the API and you can't do it manually in Control Hub. Okay, let's see if we have anything else here. And somebody was asking where the recording will be. All of our past webinars are right on our developer portal, developer.webex.com. There's a little heading up on top for, I think it's resources and then webinars, and that's our webinars page. Someone is also asking, are there or will there be any webhooks available to get the real-time speech to text for calls that are not or cannot be recorded? I haven't heard that on any
no
apps or anything like that. But
I will set the expectation to no, and if there is something planned, it won't be here for a while.
Yeah. But I guess you know, in transparency, they usually keep our team more in the present day than they do on the roadmap side of things. Um, but there is a tool that you can use for feature requests. Um, and so we recommend just actually making a formal feature request for something like that. That's usually how they start getting momentum with the product teams. And with that, I think there was also one here, and Joe, you may have covered it, but is there any duration or time constraint involved with you know the developing a license?
Uh, are we talking about like sandbox licenses?
Um, Certainly, I think it could probably somewhere around the licensing around sandboxes, because I know, like for
Yeah. So
example, oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
if you register, if you develop, if you get a server, I'm sorry, a developer sandbox, that sandbox is going to stay alive for 2 years. You'll get an email, and this is on the sweet side. You'll get an email letting you know that it's about to expire. And when you get that email, you can reach out to developer support to extend the life of that sandbox if you find it useful and you're still using it. Alternatively, if that does expire, you can just get a new one and start developing with that one.
Yeah, and I think also there was also maybe needed a little bit of clarification around the client secret. I think maybe there was a perception that the client secrets had an expiration time, but
No,
I don't think that's the case. It's so they're revoked, right, Joe?
yeah, it's still they're revoked. So actually, the client secret has to do with your application. So you as a developer have control over those values. It's a username and password. You got to think of the client secret and the client ID. Client ID is a username for your app, and the client secret is a password for your app. So when you're doing things like getting tokens from the application token endpoint or the access token endpoint, we're going to ask for in the documentation. It outlines a requirement for a client ID and client secret, and that is just a method of authentication, letting us know that this is a trusted developer that we're giving the sensitive information to on behalf of a web licensed WebEx user or WebEx organization in the case of service apps.
Okay, and we have one more question here. What happens to the public service app if the account that was created with is removed from the organization?
Good question. I don't know. I'm assuming. Uh, I'm assuming that the user would still have access to the dev portal. They just wouldn't have access to organization data. But that is a good question that I'd have to ask product about. I'm not so sure. I'm just thinking in my head that that's how that would work. That developer would still have access to it. And if that does happen, and let's say you own it, actually your org would own it. Your org would own that app. But if there is you can open a developer support ticket, and we can transfer that if the org is okay with it.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, here, are there any limitations to what is allowed on the App Hub, or on what does the approval process look like? Want to give a little bit of insight in there with the last few seconds?
Yes. So for service apps in specific, specifically with service apps, we do have a lot of material on the developer portal on what we're looking for from the business. There's a review process. It's two-legged. The first leg of the review process is a business review where my colleague Kathy Hahn will go over all of the information that you provided in the web form for submitting, your app description, what does your landing page look like, and other deliverables that are going to be customer facing on the app hub and in the control hub in this case. So we want to make sure where that language and grammar is correct, and that we're not using Cisco brands in any way that we're not supposed to, and we're following the branding guidelines and things like that. From a technical perspective, what's going to happen is you're probably going to get on a call with me, and I'm going to ask you some things like, how are you managing your tokens? Are you putting them in a secure database or a token manager? What are you doing when a customer deauthorizes your application? Are you destroying those? And then what does your application do? I'm going to take a look at the scopes. I'm going to make sure that the scopes that you selected map correctly to the functionality of your app. And I have some other basically things that'll happen during an interview. I work really closely with developers when they're in this process, so it's not going to be like you're submitting to some black box and maybe you'll get a response or not. You're actually going to be engaging with us, and definitely take a look at the documentation because we do have a lot of docs on what we're looking for App Hub submission. There's a section in the developer portal called Submitting to the Webex App Hub.
Yeah, a lot of good guidelines are in that one. So I think we're at time here. So with that, we thank everybody for joining today's session. Hope it was an informative one for you. You can always feel free to reach out to us or even better, our support team if you have any questions or need help with anything that you saw here today or any of the topics we talked about. And again, you can catch the recording over on our webinars page. I just threw the link over in our chat. So with that, we wish everybody a great rest of your week and take care, and we'll see you at the next one.